We don't measure anything about life success in terms of time, and yet time is what we all want. That's what the whole game's about. Have a career, have a business, save money, put it in wherever you put it to accumulate so that someday I can retire. And that's like, retire to what?
This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not constitute financial, legal, or investment advice. Please consult a professional advisor before making decisions based on what you hear on this show. Wealth Without Wall Street Tribe. If you love stories of freedom, you're going to love our guest today, Dr. David Phelps. David, so glad to have you on today.
Joey, Russ, it's great to be here. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Most people probably have already followed you through your leadership in the Freedom Founders, and you've obviously been an advocate for building passive income, specifically in the dental world. And we have a lot of dentists and doctors who listen to our show that already know that. But for those who don't know you, I want to kind of take you back. You had a thriving dental practice, and you made a decision that maybe most people wouldn't have. Would you mind sharing kind of that moment where you said, I have to walk away from this practice? What was at stake in your life and what was going on?
Yeah, I've been in private practice for just slightly over 20 years. And yeah, it built up a nice solid practice, let's put it that way, that was working well. But what made me change my momentum and really my call at that time was my daughter's health situation. And at the time that I left practice and sold the practice, which was 21 years ago, she was just recovering from a liver transplant and at 12 years old. And people are wondering, well, why as a child at 12 undergoing a liver transplant, what's the problem? What's the disease? And the problem with the liver came from earlier medical crises that she underwent. At age 2.5. She was diagnosed with high-risk leukemia. And that was a hard 3 years of hospitalizations and chemotherapy and spinal taps and just a whirlwind that she made it through, because kids are so resilient, and medical treatment has advanced in, as we know, in many ways. So she was saved from that. The marriage to her mother didn't survive it, and it was a no fault. Too often in life, I think we're handed situations that, to the best of our ability, we don't know how to handle, and yet we continue to co-parent her, I think, to the best of anybody's ability. Jenna had epileptic seizures subsequent to going through her treatment for leukemia, which again was a hard time because she never really was able to socialize and really get into, mainstream in terms of her activities and her socialization and really, her education. So it was really off and on again, even though we got tutors for her and try to catch up.
If you've listened to our show for any length of time, you've heard us talk about infinite banking and how we were able to use that concept to create over $50,000 a month in passive income. But it's just not that easy to figure out, how does this all connect into my own personal system?
Stallion, that's why we created the passive income operating system, bro. It shows you how to turn active income into passive income. It makes all the steps come together. If you would like to get access to it as a podcast listener, we've never given this away in public before. Go to what'swhatwallstreet.com/PIOS.
It was the liver transplant at age 12 that really caused me to consider what was my purpose in life. And I think for many of us who have careers, professions, that providing for our family, safety, security, stability, which encompasses certainly financial stability, is something we put a high mark on. We want to protect our families. And yet at the same time, I realized that the time with my daughter may be a lot shorter than I anticipated. And it was the wake-up call that I call my moment of truth, when she was in the hospital rehabbing from the liver transplant, that it really hit me that, how many more chances do I get to really be the dad that I think that God wanted me to be? Not that I was a bad dad, not that I was negligent, but I think I was, like so many of us, driven as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, to build something that would be, put air quotes, great for my family, or to be successful by the different societal and industry terms that we might be accustomed to, what, KPIs and that sort of thing. And one thing I realized was that the KPI that was missing for me was quality time with my daughter. That was never part of the financial KPIs that my accountant sent back, every quarter. However that happens, it was never there. Everything else looked good, but that one in my mind didn't look so good. So I made a hard call. I made a decision right there when she was in the hospital, just a few weeks after the transplant. And I just decided right then and there, I can't keep trying to juggle so many responsibilities and obligations. And my primary one had to be my family, my daughter at that point. So I made the decision to sell my practice at that point, thinking I could come back and go back into dentistry. I just really wanted to buy some time then, because I didn't know how much more time I would get. And I'd foregone opportunities in the past thinking, well, we'll get over this one. We'll get over this one. This one, once we get past this, then life will be good. And then I can, really, be the dad I want to be. And what I've learned in life is so often that as much as we want to be the right parent or spouse, partner, that oftentimes we move the goalposts in terms of when we're willing to actually focus on what we really want in life, and we put it off. Well, I'll get there whenever I get this done, and then I get that done, and like, well, now just a little bit more here. And I was doing the same thing. And that's when I just made the decision. I'm not going to do it that way anymore.
Wow. I mean, first of all, hats off to you that you went through such a difficult time in your family, in particular with your daughter, that you also decided to give up something that most people would find ridiculously difficult to give up. Walk me through, at that moment when you're there, what's going through your mind as it relates to, I mean, obviously you've made the decision about on the emotional side, and like this is the most important thing, but what were the thoughts about how am I going to be able to sustain, and like what was going through your mind about that particular transition?
Yeah, 100% right. There's the emotional side that many times drives us to make, at least to consider decisions. And some decisions are, I want that vacation. I want that house. I want that car. And then if we're prudent, we come back and go to the logical side of our brain and go, okay, rationally, is that really something that can happen? Should happen? Should I do that? Well, obviously, there's no question that making a decision for one's family member, daughter, spouse, whoever, is not going to be looked upon by anybody as like a bad move. But still, you have to come back and say, well, logically, rationally, can I pull this off and still bring the part that I still knew I was responsible for, and that's to provide, some level of financial security. So here's really what it was, and I tell people today it was really back of the napkin figuring. Is I really had to become clear about what, not just but what my family really needed versus what I or anybody else or they wanted. And many times we as the entrepreneurs, the drivers, we get mixed up with that. We believe that what everybody needs, what everybody wants is what people need. And truth be told, our family, spouses, partners, kids that are still at home, they want us as much as they can have us, and us means that quality time, not just at home on your phone and doing all kinds of ancillary work. They want us, and I had to learn that, because I thought I was doing. Many of us think, well, I'm doing the right thing. I'm sacrificing for my family. I'm not home a lot because I'm doing this for the family. And if you really really took a survey of your family, and they were clear that they were not going to be admonished for giving the wrong answer, and you ask them, what do you really want? Would you like the Disneyland vacation? Would you like the extra vacation home somewhere, or would you like me to be home or take you to school, or coach your soccer team, or be there when you're doing this, and take off from work early? I guarantee you they all say, we don't care really where we live or what that other stuff. But we never have those conversations, because we just assume that the right thing to do is to create, is nice and kind of big a life as possible. And that's how we oftentimes justify the hard work that we do. So I had to really discern what was necessary to provide the base level of financial security for my family. Fortunately, part of my story is that, and I think it bodes well for a lot of what you gentlemen teach and coach on, but I started creating early in life, actually before I became a dentist and went into practice. I started becoming very involved, curious, and started building some real estate on the side. While I was in dental school, and built that. So I did have some additional equity net worth that was producing a level of income that I didn't have to show up every day to go to work. That helped. And then I knew I could take the equity from the sale of my practice, and also I knew a place I could put that. And I think that's a key thing, is I knew where to put it, at least in my hands, where I could put it, that would also provide. So I could run those numbers and say, what was really important? What was negotiable and what was non-negotiable? And when it comes down to it, when you're thinking about your family, there's a lot more that's negotiable in one's life than we want to think there is. And so when I cut it down and said, you know what, this is very feasible because I don't need all this other stuff. I can cut it down because the main thing was I want to be flexible and able to be with my daughter, whether she was recovering from something or the times when she was well and got back to school and got to participate on the volleyball team. Man, I wanted to be there, not just to have to try to tell my front office staff, like, well, could you like move the schedule around so I can, try to squeeze out of here at 2:00 in the afternoon. That's just so much friction. And I didn't want to live life like that anymore. Right. I mean, it's just so much. And if I could clear the plate, clear the deck, at least for a couple of years, and just say, I don't have to play that game anymore. That's what I wanted. And that's what I was able to achieve by making that decision.
Well, it's a decision that in hindsight, you're so thrilled that you did it, right? Like, I think the part that so many people who are listening to you are like, yeah, but when, like is this delayed, financial freedom is a someday goal instead of a right now goal.
Yeah.
And you went through that process. Clearly you would prefer for your daughter never to have any of those issues. You had to make that decision. But as a result, now you get more time with her because it went through. That was God's perfect timing, right? Like, when man intends for evil, God intends for good. And I seeing you go through that, I mean, clearly you've had more quality time with her than you ever would have had it not happened, I would say.
No question about it. God builds character through allowing us, maybe putting us through turns in our life that we didn't ask for. We wasn't our part of our plan, but how often do we know that our plans are not God's plans? And it's a lot easier for me today. Certainly was not easy back then. And many of the things that, I have had to deal with, as we all have, never easy at the time. And many times we look and say, well, why me? What did I do wrong? What do I need to do to improve? And I've had to change my outlook on that and say, no, really, God has a different purpose. Not that my purpose was wrong, not that becoming a dentist was wrong. God had a purpose for me, and I had to be willing to take that door and see the other doors were shutting and be, with faith, say, I'm going to go. I'm going to go. I don't know exactly what's going to look like on the other side, but I'm going to go. And because it just was within me to do that. We know it's really hard to do. And anybody who's gone through tough times and had to really make tough decisions, I grant you, it is very difficult to do. But my stories, and I'm sure stories that you gentlemen have, and people that you work with, every time I talk to somebody who's had to go through and make some tough decisions that were not by their choice, the other side, when they got to the other side, there were breakthroughs and life was better and many times more purposeful. And boy, that's certainly how my life turned out. And as you said, I'm grateful for that opportunity. Even for my daughter, even though sure, I hated for her to have to go through what she did those years. But you know what? She's turned out to be a lovely young lady, and her character was also molded, and she's resilient and has perseverance and has a frame about the world that I think is way better than mine was when I was her age, because I hadn't gone through any tough times in my early life. I was blessed. I didn't go through anything tough.
Right.
Mine was hit, as a young father and spouse relatively early, and that didn't make it any easier. So if you go through some tough times early in life, I think it's not a bad thing to do if that's the way the course of life goes.
Well, I think it's important for this interview for the audience to have heard that backdrop, like what shaped your thinking today. And now let's fast forward to where you're coaching and teaching, people who have high incomes but are time poor.
Yeah.
And you're telling them there's a process, there's a framework. What is step one for the person listening to regain control over their life and time, according to Dr. David Phelps?
Assuming somebody is in a partnership, a marriage partnership, then it's got to start with conversation between those two partners. That's where I see a lot missing, is that we get busy in life with all that we take on with growing families and growing businesses, and just, kind of divide and conquer world, which many people do pretty darn well. But the conversations about vision, what was that dream when we first got together and got married, and that vision gets distorted. I'm not saying bad in a bad way, but we lose that vision, and we can easily get caught up in the machinations of what busy lives take over. And where it's important to look at finances from budgeting and metrics, and net worth and income, and those are all important. But as I said earlier, the KPI that we typically don't look at until we have the hopefully magical someday, retirement, which is way too long to put time on the metric scale, is we don't measure anything about life success in terms of time. And yet time is what we all want. That's what the whole game's about. Have a career, have a business, save money, put it in wherever you put it, to accumulate and amass some net worth, some capital base, so that someday I can retire. And that's like, right, retire to what? Exactly where you're hoping to retire to. And most of that retirement is baked into society, and that's somewhere in your 60s, right? I mean, that's kind of baked in to the game plan, which I think is so outdated and a bad model. I say don't retire, just evolve and make time one of your wealth KPIs. If it's not there, then you're missing the boat. And if you take everything in construct with time as an element that you're always focused on as well, you'll become much more efficient in the use of your time. I think it forces us to become better leaders of whatever business or even a career, even an employee. You could magnify your value so that you can have that thing that we all want, and that's more time, not at retirement, but along the journey. And that also makes your journey much more durable than people who get on that hamster wheel and find out, wow, the burnout comes so quickly. And that makes for unhappy people. It makes for unhappy relationships, unhappy families. If the primary breadwinner is always under stress and trying to keep their head above water, I know what that feels like. And so many people, I think, deal with that. So getting the vision together, once you can look at the vision, then you can reverse engineer, back it back into, okay, where are we today? And that's, mapping out certainly finance and net worth and burn rate, I call freedom number, mapping that out and saying, okay, here's where we are, here's where we want to be. And again, the big KPI for me is time. Now we can build the model around everything else that needs to make that time happen. But until you're clear about what that looks like in a certain time frame, is it in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years? Map it out. And now you've got milestones to measure your progress, not just through a net worth accumulation, which is what most financial advisors do, as you generally know, but there's some congruency and correlation with the time factor.
Right.
It's not there. We've missed the boat.
There was nothing worse than walking into class when you're in school and the teacher saying, "Pop quiz day." Why? Because you were unprepared. Are you unprepared, though, for financial freedom?
Don't be. Find out how close you are by taking our 30-second quiz at wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/quiz.
Hey, Tribe, have you ever wondered how billionaires actually invest?
Because let's be honest, billionaires aren't following the same playbook as everyone else. They're not chasing that next hot stock or jumping in and out of the market.
No, they're thinking in decades, not quarters. They're focused on cash flow, not just net worth, and they're building legacy with every move that they make.
That's why we're excited to tell you about a podcast that we love. It's called Invest Like a Billionaire.
Yes, hosted by our friends Ben and Bob Frazier. They break down the exact strategies that ultra wealthy use, the family offices, the private equity firms, and institutions.
And they make it simple and actionable for people like us. Whether you're just starting your journey or looking to level up, this show gives you a backstage pass to billionaire-style investing.
All right, so go search Invest Like a Billionaire on your favorite podcast app and hit the subscribe button.
what you just said is so critical. And what we talk about a lot on our show is if you have the vision that includes what will life look like after I'm free, why would you ever delay it until you're 65 or 70 or whatever the number is that we really aren't in control of? Like those variables are far too great. And then focus on what that number actually has to be. You can keep score with that number a lot better than you can this mystical mountain of cash that your advisor's telling you to accumulate to. And so you've gotten those two things out of the way. Now talk to me like I'm a doctor that is kind of woken up to this idea. I've got my vision, I've got my number. What's the next step in your mind that you help people do?
So just building out a roadmap or a blueprint, again, through the conversations and determining with the couple what their negotiables are, what they're willing, what they'd be willing to give up if it compressed time to get to that vision. And that's a personal decision. I don't tell people what you need to do, but by laying out the different levers or dials so they can see them clearly and say, well, if I tweak this one, if I gave up this to get this, is that a good trade? Because everything's a trade-off. There's no solutions, right? Everything's a trade-off. So helping people understand what the trade-offs are, and that's where most people don't have any clarity at all. No, zero, none. I mean, it's just, and once they see that, it's like, wow, we actually have more control than we ever thought, and we can make decisions now that will lead us there. So I think that's the biggest piece, is so they can see what dials or what levers they have control over to determine what their lifestyle can look like, not again at some mystical retirement age, but like in the next quarter, we can start buying back time and create more discretionary freedom and reduce stress like almost immediately, to different degrees, if we have a plan. The problem that most have is that that plan is pushed out to that magical someday. And that's really hard when you don't have some gratification for the work or the plan or the roadmap that supposedly someone's put in place. If you can't feel it until you're in your 60s and retirement age, bad plan. It should never be that way. So that's the big piece that I see, is just giving people the clarity to understand what they do control versus what they don't control.
Well, and physicians and dentists are great process followers. I mean, you were good at school. That was something that you followed a process, you were excellent at it, and you repeat the process over and over again. As a dentist, you have to be very precise in the very thing that you do, right? My wife is a former dentist. I know and love all the facts that she is very precise on the details. And if you give her a process, she will follow it. Now, one of the things that I'm interested in how you overcome this, because as I used to go and speak to dental schools and medical schools, that I always butted up against the process of I'm supposed to do this job. I've become great at school. I've learned how to do this. Now I have the high income, and I am now trying to figure out how to get out of it. That usually was a huge conflict, right? Just a personality conflict, the way that they were wired. And it's why I think so many doctors and dentists end up working late in their 70s and 80s, is because they've just said, well, this is the model. So when you're teaching and you're helping people overcome that, what are other elements that maybe we haven't touched on yet that would help maybe unlock someone's mind that's going, oh, I need to start doing this, investing outside of the traditional, or typical ways, like in 401ks and IRAs and the stock market, isn't so scary, isn't so atypical. How do you help them see that? Because maybe they're more trained to look at, this is the norm, this is the abnormal, but you're like, no, this is what is normal. You just need to understand how it works.
Well, first I'd say that one of the most important decisions that we make in our lives is who we choose to be our partner in life. So I would start there. We make that choice whatever age we do. And I would tell everybody that you need to focus a lot of your work and intentions around that relationship, number one, because the worst thing, if you want to talk about not having freedom and having your wealth decimated, it's not because the stock market drops 30%, which it will over time, but it's a loss you have when you go through a dissolution of a marriage partnership. So I just put that out there. I know it sounds very basic, but I would just tell young people, particularly, the grass is not greener. Focus on what you've got, because that's number one. Beyond that, I would say that again, a very basic tenet that we've all grown up with, we all understand inherently, is that live below your means. And it's very easy, particularly when one's been blessed through hard work and effort and training, to be able to earn above average income, trading time for dollars, which professionals in many categories are able to do. That there's some level of entitlement or a comparison factor of, I deserve to have this much. I sacrificed a lot in my life. I and my family deserve to live a certain lifestyle, and you can add all the things to that, because I can always, make up for the cost of that. In fact, my income, it tends to go up every year. Well, that's great, wonderful, but that's the treadmill or the hamster wheel that we can get on, and just by certainly never exceeding, but always taking what is called today, profit first, taking the chips off the table first and putting that into, let's just put it into savings first. We're not even talking about allocating it to investments, just getting disciplined. So you take that off the table first, and whether that's going into retirement accounts or taxable accounts, I don't care. Let's just do that first. If you start out your life that way and never exceed that, then you're going to focus on what counts. We know that the compounding of a savings over time, especially when you start early in life, will way outgrow what your needs are and give you way more than you need. But very few do that, because there's always more time, and I can always make more money. So why get worried about that early on? Now, when you start to have that disciplined savings, whatever buckets those go into, yes, I believe that we've been told and sold a myth by Wall Street that Wall Street is the place to go. It's the default mode. I'm not saying that people shouldn't invest on Wall Street. I think you can certainly make a case for allocations there. I'm not the expert there. I'm not saying
Joey and I will say that for you. Just
Yeah, shut that down. 100%.
all right, thank you. Well, I'll leave it to you guys to call that. But here's the irony: is that we're entrepreneurs, right? We went to learn a skill set so that we could, be the boss, right? And create a business that we got to control, the good, bad, and the ugly of it. But we still want to be that control. Why do we not want to control our financial future, other than just the money we make by trading time for dollars? Why do we not want to do that? Well, we're told it's too complicated. We're told that there's experts out there who will take care of it for us if we just, hand over our accounts and have a meeting once a year or whatever it is, that they'll allocate it for us and manage it for us. Why do we do that? It shouldn't be in our DNA, but we do that as an industry, professionals, high income people, because we're told that's the way to do it. And I say, no, you can learn this. You don't have to have an MBA in finance to understand how to be the orchestrator, not without people around you. I am certainly a fan of getting some guidance and advice in special areas of need, but you can learn enough about market cycles, economy, and what I love is alternative investments, because it's tangible, hard assets, and it's something that the government can't make more of, because that's where inflation comes from. Financial markets, as we know, very manipulated, a lot of arbitrage, a lot of derivatives, which is really a house of cards. If I've got something tangible, I mean, it can still be leveraged, but at least I can see what that looks like. I can see inside what that is. Does it take more time, effort to do that? Yes. Is it worth it? Yes.
For sure. David, I first of all, you're just music to our ears. Other than that whole comment about Wall Street, we'll let you slide on this one time. I'm a doctor. I'm listening to the show, and I hear your story, and I'm like, wow, he made the right decision. I don't think anybody listening is saying, that was a bad move in any way, shape, or form. It was amazing for you to do that. I hear that I should take control, and it makes sense, right? I'm driven. I take control of everything else in my life, but this one thing I've left out there. I love how you said that. But there's something that's holding me back from taking that step. At your experience working with dentists and doctors, what is that one thing, and what can you offer to help them get over that hump to take action today?
Yeah, it's fear. People don't trust themselves. They maybe trust themselves in the areas they've been trained in and have processes, as we talked about. And you only gain that trust by doing it and having someone over your shoulders when you're starting, or you go to CE courses to learn to get better. That's part of having guides in your life. And we're taking it back to CE. When you go take a course in CE to improve your technical skills, well, you look to find somebody who actually has done it. and is doing it, whatever it is. And you can see that they have a track record. And also you want to look and see that they also have other principles and values in their life that are also somewhat commensurate with yours. I mean, there's a lot of smart, wise people out there, but not people I necessarily would be people I go, well, yeah, maybe they're making it big over here, but I see other elements of their life doesn't look so hot. Maybe I don't follow that completely. So find people that have alignment, but actually have done what you like to do. So overcoming that lack of self-confidence, the lack of trust in oneself, find guides, but also find where the guide has social proof of concept, which means who else have they helped? Who else is part of the tribe, the community? That's how I would vet before I got too entrenched in and following the advice or guidance of somebody else. Is what have they done? Who are they leading? And can I see what the real stories are, to see if any of the people that have been following certain advice or principles, are they living a life true to what they expected to have, or is there something I'm not seeing that I need to look at? And that's a logical aspect of skepticism we should all have, because there's lots of things out there that are sold that don't have a true basis to them. So yes, you have to do some due diligence before you even get started in something that may be outside your comfort zone.
No, I love that. We say that all the time, and it's such a great lesson. If you're listening to the show for the very first time, when you're listening to any advisor, right, one of the key instruments there is understanding, if you're listening to somebody, I'm assuming that you want what they have. And so how much do you know of what they have? Like, right? Like, especially in the financial world, as starting from someone who got in this industry, had no money, had parents with no money, had friends with no money, and yet I'm advising people on money. And you have to start somewhere, and everybody does, right? But it's too often times where people don't consider the source, meaning if you're a physician or a dentist and you're trying to figure out, hey, how do I solve this equation of getting out of the rat race, working daily in my profession as a technician, to living life on my terms with my family, being able to spend more time on them, there's no better person than David, because you've heard his story. You've heard exactly how he's done it. That is a great example of choosing someone whose life is what you would like to have, and then following the steps and processes because you've obviously done it. That's a great model. I love every bit of that. And let's assume that one of these dentists or doctors are listening and they're saying, hey, where do I go? How do I start consuming more information from you? Where do you send them, David?
Well, I've authored quite a few books over the years that provide a lot of my philosophy, some of my stories, some of the frameworks that we use, so people can see, well, is that even something that makes sense? So they can pick up books. I have a podcast that's the Freedom Founders podcast. So just like we're doing today, I have great conversations. We got to have one just a few weeks ago. So with other people that bring different aspects to the entire scope of what's freedom. So we've got that, and for people who would like a little bit more connection to see if there might be a fit. Certainly we offer a discovery call, which is never a sales call. I don't sell anybody. I invite people to check us out. I invite people to see if there's alignment and fit, and we have a really easy process that we can take people through without having them go head over heels into something until we know both sides that it's potentially a good fit. I love to have people that I know that are committed to a plan, but also that they're at a stage in life where we can make a difference. And we can't make a difference for everybody, but we always want to point people wherever they are in a good direction where they can have a model. And maybe there's a right time for Freedom Founders, but maybe a right time to be focused on other areas of their life that could propel them to a point. So try to be very, very transparent with people is the way I like to live my life, wholly with the people that we are able to serve.
Well, David, we appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you so much for being here. Tribe, if you want to follow David, we've created a page, wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/The Freedom Founders, and we'll take all of the links and things that David was mentioning and put it on there if that's simpler for you. Just kind of looking back at this episode, you don't need more money. You need more clarity, right? Time is what your family really wants with you, not more things, not more items. So how do you get to the point where your passive income exceeds your monthly expenses so that you can get more of that time? And this has been a great episode just to repoint us to what is the most important things going on. And thank you, David, again, for coming. Thank you, Tribe, for listening. Have an amazing day.
This has been the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the show to break free of the Wall Street mindset and begin building wealth on your own terms in places you understand so that your wealth will never run dry. See you next episode.